I've been working in and with history organizations for 30 years, and the question of why history matters and how to convey that has always been the key question. We're all ultimately trying to get our audiences to engage with history, to feel that they're a part of it, feel that their stories matter, and that this whole endeavor of holding on to history and preserving it and ultimately interpreting it for new audiences means something and is going somewhere, and this report does a great job of showing that it can lead society toward a more just place.
People have a lot of suspicions about historians and about their interpretations, and they tend to assume that any sort of interpretation is subjective and biased. These framing strategies are ways of helping historians to get past those unproductive ways of thinking and build on the more productive ways of thinking that we saw.
I think now we have this framework and a toolkit that we can share with the staff and the educators that work on these programs every day, and that's going to be a great resource.
What we're finding is that people really assume that there is one objective truth about the past that is out there and is waiting to be found, and that it's very easy to find and determine. It really makes it difficult for people to understand what historical interpretation involves and what the process is that historians are using to develop their findings and reach a historical consensus.
Just think about the ways in which history is animated. History has its eyes on you, history is watching. History doesn't do anything. Historians do. Thinkers do, teachers do, archivists do. We are the ones who engage with the past, who put the clues and the pieces together to understand in an ever-shifting landscape of knowledge what has happened, so that then we can turn that into a tool of utility.
Advancing history is not just accepting history that was written 50 or 100 years ago, it's constantly questioning what new way of looking at it will help us really understand the history of my community or the history of my country.
What we're talking about is kind of certain pathways that can get us out of those weeds of these polarized debates. A metaphor of the process of historical interpretation is like doing detective work. It's a chance to showcase the process of doing history. Academic historians, public historians, people working in museums and historical sites, everyone in that broader field, what they're doing and how that's important.
I really do like the idea of the detective metaphor, that disbands this binary, like it's just this thought and this thought, which almost always is going to be diametrically opposed to each other. But now, if we're starting to unpack it and we have a third thought, a fourth thought, and before you know it, 10 thoughts, now we're not looking at a binary anymore, we're looking at a spectrum. And that's where I believe we can try to find true consensus.
It's really about questioning and opening up that dialogue, having honest conversations, questioning who told this story, why is this story being told this way? How do we gather all these facts and evidence? How do they make sense, right? How do you put them all together and create that new narrative? And that's going to be exciting.
People have an understanding of history as learning from past mistakes. That value of progress builds on that thinking, but it makes it, more specific by pairing it with justice, saying this isn't just about progress for progress's sake, we also have to address past injustices.
People care deeply about those stories when they connect them to other people, when they connect them to their own lives and their lived experiences.
I know many history museums have a long-standing permanent exhibit on display, right? They need to make changes, they need to evolve into a different narrative, bring in some new labels, bring in some new language.
And so what we're trying to do now is take this opportunity to convert those nervous landscapes into places of belonging by being honest about the history, being pluralistic about the history, and also offering an opportunity for people to engage in their authentic selves in this space without shame or guilt.
I like to think of democracy and history as verbs, right? They should be animated and active and alive. And the report lays out a blueprint for us to expand the power of our own engagement to then ignite civic engagement.
We came up with this report, and it would definitely have been useful before all of these national debates kind of broke to the surface. And now that they have, it's really going to be a set of unifying principles, I think, that history practitioners and history teachers and people who care about history and history organizations can all rally around and use.
Many people have stepped up and said, I want to make some changes. I don't think that's my story being told in that museum, for instance. I want to see my story being told in those walls, and how do we do that? And I think if museums and organizations use this as an opportunity to take a step back and say, let's do something about it. Let's make sure those stories are being collected and those voices are being heard. We'll be that much closer to a more perfect union.